I think most of us know the story of Aladdin and his lamp. Most of us, when we sit down and we close our eyes and dream of what would you do if you got a wish? What would you do if you got 3 wishes? Certainly the Disney version of Aladdin has him becoming a wealthy prince who at the end decides to use his final wish to free the genie and undo all of the ill his worldly desires have caused. Another version that we don't oftentimes think of, for anyone who's familiar with the film, would be the film Groundhog's Day. Anyone who doesn't know the story of that, it's about a person who wakes up and relives the same day over and over and over again. He is trapped in repeat, and he is the only one who remembers what happened in the previous day. He lives an eternity of being able to do whatever he wants. Ever had that little voice in your head say to you, "Man, I wish I could just punch that guy. He got to do it," and see the results? He could live a completely and totally materialistic life, and at the end discovered no satisfaction. The key to getting out of this cycle of daily living was actually his own happiness. He was stuck in an endless loop of sadness, and the more he sought his worldly desires, the more he felt the pain of those worldly desires. And it wasn't until he was actually a genuine, loving person that he was freed from the cycle of pain and difficulty. Kind of the same story as Aladdin. It wasn't one wish. It was a repetitious activity, but all the time we make our decisions based on what we think is going to make us happy. And it's normally based on an understanding of worldly happiness. We get the option to buy a lottery ticket because we think we're going to get rich with little effort. We know actually that the secret to success is delayed gratification. The person who is able to say, "I know this is painful now, but tomorrow it will be a little better." If you think about people who go through 4, 8, 12 years of college, some fields even longer than that if you take into account medicine and residency. This is all a period of, to some degree, delayed gratification, of us being able to say, "I am going to go through this misery now because I know in the long term it will be better." I don't know how many of you have dishes all over your kitchen that you could have just put in the dishwasher, or full dishwashers and at some point you walk in there and you say to yourself, "It would have been just so easy for me to take care of this when I had it in my hand before, but at the moment all I cared about was getting on and doing something easier." Certainly with young children in my household, the reality of looking at people who could have just taken that extra step, but instead the food becomes crusty, you end up... There are some things my daughter cooks, I'm telling you, we should make roads out of some of the stuff that I find in my sink, because it takes me near a jackhammer to get it out of the bowl. Just a little bit of a thought of what's the right thing to do rather than what's the convenient thing to do. The kingship, if those of you who were here probably 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago now, the kingships of the Old Testament are symbolic of what it is that rules our life. When the world rules our life, we're really distracted by the shiny red button that seems to say, don't touch me, and we really want to know what it does. We don't really care about the consequence, so we press that shiny red button. The boy, isn't that sweet good, even though we know in the long run it's probably going to be bad for our health. All those sensual things ruling our lives. We then maybe take a step where we start actually caring about how we benefit our neighbors and how we benefit the world, and we say, well, golly gosh, if I do that, I'm going to hurt somebody, so I'm not going to do it because the worldly reward is harmful to another. I want to ask you about the next step, though. What happens when what is right doesn't actually give you a worldly reward at all? How easy is it for us to make that decision? We'd heard not too long ago about the fact that David as a king didn't live up to the ideals, maybe, that one would want as their leader. That David did some things that caused some problems. He had some problems visited upon him. The number one of which, by the way, I don't know if you know what it was, David was not permitted to build a temple. His hands were too stained with blood for his sin that he could not take the next step to have a permanent house of God built in the Holy Land. This was reserved for his son Solomon. Solomon's simple request wasn't for money, wasn't for power, but was for the wisdom of Solomon, a wisdom which was simply, help me be wise. I don't know how many of you spent time thinking about what's the difference between being smart and wise. But to be wise is about more than having truth. It's about understanding what's right. It's not just about facts, it's about understanding with love. It's about doing something that is right for the sake of doing what is right. It is, in many ways, what Martin Luther King would preach as they prepared for sit-ins when he said, this is not going to end pretty for you. You could be beaten. You can go to jail. But as you sit there being assaulted, pray for the person who's assaulting you. The ability to do good when there can be negative worldly consequences. This is altruism. What does it mean for us to delay our gratification knowing that we are doing what is right and what is good in the moment? It is the most difficult of difficults, in my opinion. What does it mean for us to make that choice? One might say that this is Solomon building the temple. We have to start seriously examining the reasons we choose to do what we choose. And we have to ask ourselves, if we were to stand on the hilltop and say, evil must stop now, would we be willing to do that? It's a tough thing. The role of leadership, the role of saying what is right and how are we going to carry out, is the work of an adult. a person who's willing to say, I would rather be hungry and do what is right than have my stomach filled temporarily and watch things go on that are not right. This is the choice that God puts before Solomon. And you want to know the truth? He messes it up. He does. Just like when we start doing this, we will probably mess it up as well. But the vision of wisdom, of truly doing what's right, not for the sake of what we get, but because it is right, is a gift. It is what the Lord is talking about when we hear the idea of a bread that is eternal. How many of the things do we do are temporarily bound? Temporarily, not temporarily, though temporarily is temporary. How much of what we do is something that just fizzles out, and honestly, a year from now, what does it matter? What are the things that we do that actually build a permanent home for what is good, loving, and true inside of us? What is our basic moral code? What is our basic moral code that we hold on to and never stop fighting for? Swedenborg would argue, by the way, this is a very simple moral code. It's the 10 Commandments. Swedenborg loves the 10 Commandments, for anyone who doesn't know that. He writes about them over and over and over again, and it's oftentimes masked in other language. He likes to talk about, from time to time, the doctrines of the church. Most of the doctrines of the church are really just the 10 Commandments. Very simple things. Are you thinking about yourself, or are you loving another? Are you thinking about yourself, or are you loving what's ultimately true and good? At what point do the desires of your life cease you from being able to do the things that you know are truly good? Each of us have something to do this week. Each of us have an opportunity where we will be asked the question, what is it that you truly desire? Are we going to be like previous kings that look for wealth or for power or control? Or are we going to be like Solomon and ask the question, what does it mean for me to be wise in this moment? You might ask yourself, I do not have a bronze lamp to rub. There's no magic genie. One might say, I'm not living the same day over and over again, unless you are, in which case I'm sorry. But sometime this week, you will be asked the question of what is most important to you. Do you build that temple to what is good and true and loving, or do you build a temple to yourself? The simple prayer, the simple question of grant me the wisdom to see when I'm in it for me and when I'm in it for the other, is an easy way when you are stuck. By the way, I'm not going to hold you guilty for being unaware that you're answering that question. If you don't know that you're being selfish, you can't really work on it at that moment. But sometime this week, you're going to have that little voice inside your head that says, I should really do this. And there's going to be a whole lot of you that's saying, I don't want to. What would it mean for you to remember this moment and say, I'm going to do what I know is good and true? Amen.